Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
With the Trump administration stonewalling a proper transition, President-elect Joe Biden is taking matters into his own hands.
Holding a virtual roundtable with frontline healthcare workers
as he keeps the fight against coronavirus front and center in his transition agenda.
Without certification from the General Services Administration, the Biden team says it doesn't have access to the funds and briefings necessary
to ensure that we have the best plans in place for equitable distribution of the vaccine. But we haven't been able to sit down with the Trump administration at all.
America's now regularly recording more than 150,000 cases a day, and as new infections rise, so do the number dying every day.
In its weekly report, the White House Coronavirus Task Force
warns of aggressive, unrelenting, expanding, broad community spread,
reaching most counties without evidence of improvement, but rather further deterioration.
This is the saddest thing of all, because this is really a question of depraved heart. Now, lawyers out there, they just said, what? Yes, depraved heart, depraved mind. That is an element that you need to prove if you're going to charge somebody with murder in the second degree. And I think that once Donald Trump leaves this White House and there is no longer any immunity for him to rely on, to protect him, to shield him from lawsuits, civil suits, money damages, fines from the IRS, etc., and then criminal charges. And, you know, they've only been looking at white-collar criminal charges so far. The legal liability that Cyrus Vance's office has been investigating in New York, these are the white-collar crimes, okay? These are potentially what I've been referring to for the last, 3 years now as RICO crimes, because he has been looking holistically at the entire Trump organization. And the RICO Act is racketeering and illegal criminal conspiracy organizations, okay? And Cyrus Vance, who I don't know if he'd be my first pick to prosecute, a guy like Donald Trump, but that's who is looking in and has been looking into Donald Trump's white-collar crimes, the U.S. Attorney in New York. Now, everybody knows about Letitia James. She's the Attorney General in New York. She's looking at civil suits. She's looking at, reporting him to the IRS for tax fraud, things like that, on the casinos that he had, this venture fund. They're looking for all kinds of fraud that was insurance fraud based on what Michael Cohen testified to and the documents that Michael Cohen presented when he was under oath in front of Congress, right? But Cyrus Vance, he's looking at the crimes. He's looking at the criminal portion of Trump's liabilities. And so far, he's looking at tax fraud and insurance fraud. He's also looking at his history of doing business with foreign actors, concealing the sources of his income, and also maybe money laundering as a way to conceal the source of his income. So that altogether, that would be the Trump organization. That would be a RICO statute trigger. And you could see Donald Trump tried like a mobster, truly. But what about this second-degree murder that's going on right in front of our face? And it is. It's going on right in front of our face. Now, a lot of people have brought up to me a prosecutor named Glenn Kirschner. And I went and I actually started listening to Glenn Kirschner and his theory of the case. and whether or not Trump is guilty or whether or not Trump should be indicted for, right, because he can't decide if he's guilty, but whether or not Trump could be indicted for or should be indicted for murder, and if so, what kind of murder. And Glenn Kirschner has presented a very solid case about murder too, second-degree murder.
What Donald Trump has just done, by virtue of these tapes that Bob Woodward released, is he has upped his own criminal ante to second-degree murder. And here's why. He was lying to the American people about the danger this virus posed. Think about this, Dean. He was saying to Bob Woodward in very dramatic tones, you know, this thing is airborne. All you need to do is breathe near somebody who's infected, and, you know, you're going to get it. He didn't tell the American people that, but what did he do? He refused to order the production of the personal protective equipment, the masks, the PPE, that not only our healthcare workers desperately needed because of shortages, but we all now know we all needed it, and he lied to us about that. At the same time, he was arranging for his State Department to deliver PPE to China, depriving the American people of it. This man has upped the criminal ante to second-degree murder, and there are only two elements for second-degree murder. The first is that you caused the death of another. The second element is the intent element, and here's where it would otherwise get tricky if we didn't have Donald Trump's incriminating admissions. The second element is it can be satisfied in one of three ways. Either you intended to kill somebody. We're not going to say Donald Trump intended to kill people. I would argue you might be able to make a straight face showing. Or if he didn't intend to kill, he intended to inflict serious bodily injury. Let's give him that one. He didn't intend to do that. The third is what's called conscious disregard. And that's defined as your conduct was in conscious disregard of the extreme risk you were creating to other human beings that they would suffer death or serious bodily injury. Trump has admitted, in my opinion, as a career prosecutor, and frankly, I was the most experienced homicide prosecutor in the Department of Justice because of our unique jurisdictional mandate in D.C., that is second-degree murder, and Donald Trump must be held accountable.
So that is a solid case, all right? The first part, did people die? Did you cause the death of another? Obviously, he did. He lied, and he caused the deaths of others. Then you have to prove intent, like what was in his mind. And Glenn is giving him a pass that he's saying, well, he didn't intend to really kill you. He just ended up killing you. And he didn't intend to cause bodily harm. He just ended up, so he's giving him a pass on these two elements, these two things that have to go along with, did you kill somebody? But the third thing, conscious disregard, or sometimes it's called depraved indifference or depraved heart. And the legal definition of depraved indifference or depraved heart is, quote, conduct so wanton, so deficient in a moral sense of concern, so lacking in the regard for the lives of others, and so blameworthy that it constitutes murder. Depraved heart murder. Hey, future biographers of Donald Trump, there's your title for your book. Depraved heart murderer. I believe we have that case. I really do. I mean, his murderousness, his malevolence, they don't entirely overlap because 251,000, more than 250,000 Americans are dead, but that's out of a sheer lack of caring. Because he's so disorganized, even if he had evil intent and wanted you killed, he'd probably botch it. You know what I'm saying? So, but I think this case needs to be made. And I believe that Trump has to be held accountable for what he's done. Not just the obstruction of justice, not just the perjury, not just the tax fraud, not just the insurance fraud, not just bank fraud, and perhaps money laundering, but for murder. RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.